Alrighty. What's up, everybody? Glad to see everybody here. I know we've got a few people missing with various sickness and disease, as is the just phrase that I feel like could be used to describe the last few years. But as I was telling Bobby earlier, I would much rather have people text me and be like, hey, I'm not going to make it, I'm not feeling good, than show up and tell me that in person. It's like, oh yes, please. But we're recording this for them. We'll be able to put it up there later. So you guys want to say hi to the camera over there on the side? We'll be able to put that up on YouTube later for anybody who wants to participate. But Toby was playing with the drumsticks. I'm just gonna fiddle with those the whole time. If you were here last week or were able to see what we talked about last week, we started this new series going through the Psalms, and specifically we're focusing in on how to just find comfort in the Psalms, how to understand the fact when really it feels like people around us have let us down in some form or another. In the sermon last week, I talked about especially when it feels like people who are leaders or people in authority above us, or even just really close people to us, have felt like we just feel like they've let us down in some form or another. And I talked about the importance of, you can see in the Psalms, the importance of expressing those things to God and not just bottling it up. But on top of that, the importance of making sure that we don't lose hope. And so overall, this is just kind of the theme of the next few months for us here at Wayfarers, is letting the Psalms kind of teach us how to think, how to live, really lives kind of in the way of Jesus. Other thing I mentioned last week was that Jesus quotes the Psalms more than any other book of the Bible. So it's obvious that it was of central importance to him, and I feel like should be of central importance to us. This week I saw something really crazy that was talking about almost all of the examples we can find of the earliest songs that they sang in the church were pulled from Psalms. So it was very important to the early church. Should be really important to us as well. But it's our spiritual formation night, so this isn't a night for you guys to hear me talk. I've talked plenty last week. You can go check out that sermon if you want to hear the full context of it. The idea of our night tonight is just to give you an opportunity to practice it. Put this into practice, and get to really experience how diving into the Psalms can really help to shape and form us in our lives. So I'm going to pass out sheets of paper here. There's 2 sheets, so take 2 and then pass it down. I think we've got enough for everybody. You will need to, there's going to be a writing component at the very end, so I'm also going to pass around the pen cup. We've got a large variety of different pens, so pick your favorite, whatever you would like. We can kind of take it from there. So the other thing I challenged y'all to do last week was, if we're trying to be kind of informed by the Psalms in that way, if you take every weekday, 1 day a week, and read 1 Psalm a day, it would take you about 6 months to get through the whole of the Psalms. A little less than that, actually, but we're starting late in the year. It's not right at the beginning of the year. I'm curious, how many of you did that? Did anyone do that? Raise a hand. Jacob, what was so the challenge is, I would love for you guys to read a psalm a day, starting with Psalm 1. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Nice. My confession time is that I completely forgot. I'm the one that challenged you guys to do it, and I did not do it, so I'm falling behind there. But I'm
I can check a couple more.
Yeah.
Is that document pulled up on your computer?
We'll need,
Oh, is there not enough?
I think we need two more.
Okay.
yeah, it should be full.
I thought I printed 15 copies, but I'll print it off real quick. Take like 2 seconds. That's what happened. There wasn't any more paper in the printer, so it just printed until it ran out of paper, and then it was. So those are printing out here. We'll pass the last few out. Just a second. All right. Any more to read? Okay, you got the blank piece of paper, so you can just take 2 there. Adrian, you need one as well?
Yes, please.
All right. Cool.
Toby.
Cool, says Toby.
Have another copy or?
Here, there's more.
All right, so if you did not get a chance to read through the Psalms, you're going to knock one of the 5 out today. We're starting at the very first Psalm. And so I'm just going to read it for you. This is Psalm 1. It really sets up all of the Psalms. Most scholars believe that the first 2 Psalms are supposed to be kind of an introduction to the entire book. So it kind of teaches you how to read the other Psalms and really the purposes of the rest of the book. So Psalm 1 says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction." Now, there's a lot of really good stuff in here that I could pull out. I actually got the opportunity to preach at another church recently, and I preached on this psalm, and I broke it down verse by verse, talking through a lot of that kind of stuff. So, just so you guys have access to that, I'll post the audio from that sermon on just our podcast feed. So if you look for the Wayfarers CC podcast feed where we do our deep dives and stuff like that, I'll make sure to post that, and you can do the deeper dive on this psalm if you want. But there's one verse I wanted us to focus on today. which is specifically verse 2. This idea that the person who is blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates on his law day and night. That word to meditate is something that has really come to mean a lot to me when it comes to the scriptures. I think we have so many resources available to us with the Bible that we have this tendency to read books of the Bible and then immediately be like, if we come across something we don't understand, we go and we Google it, and we find some article somewhere, some YouTube video somewhere, somebody who's explaining it, or we go and we speak to somebody and we kind of get those immediate answers to some of the questions we have. But I really firmly believe that to understand the scriptures takes some long meditation. I'm even starting to believe that it takes years of meditation. This verse says, day and night. Day and night you're meditating on the word of the Lord. And this has been really true in my life. There's been lots of verses that used to confuse me, that were difficult for me. And after years of meditating on them is when I have finally started to see them kind of fall into place. And I've seen God kind of give me just a little bit of the puzzle pieces every year, throughout the years. And then it's kind of slowly starts to fall into place. And it takes time. It takes long amounts of time meditating and really thinking about the scriptures. So there's different ways to meditate, specifically on the scriptures. In the sermon I preached, I talked about that there's a popular type of meditation informed a lot by Eastern Buddhist context, which has a lot to do with like centering yourself and emptying your mind, ridding yourself of attachments. This is the exact opposite. I think this passage is talking about the exact opposite. It's talking about filling your mind with the word of the Lord and really sitting there and continuing to fill your mind and thinking through it. So there's lots of ways we can do it, but today I wanted to practice one of the most fun ways to meditate on the scriptures, I think. And it's a exercise of meditation that is informed by a tradition related to Saint Ignatius of Loyola. Many of you may have heard that name before. There's a Loyola University here. If not, you may have heard of the Jesuits, which is like an order of monks. Saint Ignatius of Loyola is the one that started the Jesuit order. He was really big on a particular type of what he called imaginative meditation, which I've found is really, really useful and helpful when it comes to learning the scriptures, especially when we're looking at words on a page. So this next part is kind of the Indignation Exercise, we're going to call it. And I do want to give credit here. Several of the practices that we've done, I've never given credit to the person who put a lot of these together. A really good friend of mine, his name is Ben Abbott, is the one who compiled a lot of these practices together and put them together in a little book. None of them are original to him. They're all related to various different people throughout all of church history, but he did a really cool job of compiling a lot of these into one, and I definitely am regularly pulling from stuff that he does on these spiritual formation exercises. So this one, I want to give credit. Ben's the one that brought this one to my attention. So the first question here in this Indignation Exercise is asked specifically why meditate on Scripture. Meditation is a spiritual practice that allows us to listen to the still, small voice of God, Kings 19:12, and to respond to what we hear, Joshua 1:8. Meditation is encouraged over 15 times in the Psalms alone. So this is one of the other 15 times it's going to come up over and over again in the Psalms. What is meant by Ignatian meditation? Again, Ignatian of Loyola was a Catholic reformer, spiritual director, itinerant teacher, and preacher. The spiritual exercises of Ignatius grew out of his experiences with God while recovering from wounds received in battle. His story is super wild. He was a soldier for a long time, a very successful soldier, and actually had his entire right leg crushed by a cannonball in this late 1400s, early 1500s. And he was very wealthy, so he luckily had doctors that could help fix it, but what they had to do to fix his leg is they had to regularly re-break the bone and reset it over a course of months and years, where he just kept having to get it re-broke and reset until it got fixed and straightened out. Again, in the world before anesthesia and everything else. So during those recovery times, he started to read a lot more of the scriptures, a lot more of stories of other saints and different people who had done things. And this is what really encouraged him to go into ministry and kind of change the course of his life. So this horrible situation that went on in his life ended up changing the course of his life. So the question specifically is, again, he talks about imaginative meditation. So much of Scripture employs the use of imagination. The Psalms and other poetic sections of the Old Testament draw heavily from imagery. Jesus drew on imagination when he used parables, specifically. C.S. Lewis says that his imagination was baptized when he read George MacDonald's novel Fantastes. And Noah, you've actually read Fantastes, haven't you? I've never read it, but C.S. Lewis specifically mentioned it as like this book that helped to baptize his imagination and really kind of set him on this course that changed his life in a lot of different ways. Lewis argued that while reason is the natural organ of truth, imagination is the organ of meaning. The Spirit-infused imagination moves you from sterile head knowledge to life-transforming, heart-healing, biblically informed ways of being and of doing life. As we embrace the use of our God-given, Spirit-infused imagination, we enter the wonder and mystery of God and His Word. And that's a quote from Larry Warner's Journey with Jesus. So, how do we practice Ignatian meditation? There's just a few bullet points here of what this looks like. First off, you're going to try entering the scene as if you were actually there. You're going to use your imagination. So, close your eyes. I'm going to play some music. We're going to really imagination. We're using our imagination here. That's the big thing here. So try entering the scene as if you were actually there. Engage all your senses and really pay attention to your feelings. Notice how you identify with any characters of the narrative. So do you identify, and how do you identify with any of those characters in the narrative? And pay attention to any impressions, insights, or challenges and/or invitations that God is giving you in the process. And finally, ask yourself, is there anything I discovered about myself or about God? So, we're going to take a moment to try it out, practice it out. In this, I pulled a verse. It's a pretty long section, but it's a very interesting story. So we're not looking at just something that would maybe be in the Boring Bible podcast that Noah's been doing. This is a story. If you guys like story, this is an interesting story from the book of Acts and a situation that the Apostle Paul went through. And really, I want you to kind of engage in that story, engage in the feelings, engage in what your imagination can teach you while you read that story. And then I've got a series of questions afterwards that you can answer. It's kind of a guiding questions to help you answer what you experienced as you were reading that story, reading through the scriptures, and really meditating on it. And the last question specifically asks about what can you learn from this scene about when we are let down by those around us. Again, that's the context of what we've been doing over these what we're going to be doing over the next few months here at Wayfarers. And that's the reason I picked this story in particular, because particularly with the Apostle Paul, I think that we forget lots of times that the Jews were not like just his enemies. They were friends, family members, fellow countrymen, people that he trusted, people that he loved, people that he had close connections to. He himself was a Jew, never quit being a Jew, never quit identifying with that. And because of the way some of the books of the Bible are worded sometimes, it can almost seem like an us versus them sort of situation. And I want you to really pay attention in this story to the ways where it is your own people sometimes that let you down. So, I'm going to play some music. You guys can find a hard surface to write on if you need to, or you can feel free to stay seated in your seat here. And I want you to just read through that story and practice this sort of imaginative meditation. And then I'll come back to close this out. So, as is always the case with these spiritual formation nights, I'm trying to just give you guys some tools that maybe you can then go and use yourself with other scriptures and other things that you might want to do. If you found this useful, maybe those questions help you think through really engaging with sections of the Bible. Try it out in other passages. I think it might be something that would be especially helpful. I'm curious, does anybody want to share any insight they got as they were reading through this passage, and they noticed anything interesting that you would be comfortable sharing with the group? No? I'll tell you, one thing I noticed as I was reading through this passage earlier is it's interesting how similar the experience of what Paul was going through is to Jesus' experience. I had never read in this passage or just never noticed until I was really trying to put myself in the scene how the crowd of people are shouting, various different things that they shouted. It was giving me flashbacks to a lot of the crucifixion experiences that Jesus was having. And again, you guys have heard me mention it several times over the last year, but the thing that's really been impacting me lately is that the people that were shouting these things were his fellow family members and countrymen, and that emotion of feeling that sort of anger and vitriol directed at you by other people who are kind of your people in a way, is something that I think it's just hard to imagine. I feel like we've gotten tastes of it recently just with the way so many families have been getting turned against each other, and the way so many people that we cared about have had different disagreements with us, but that's a whole other level of it. And so it was kind of interesting and engaging to notice that. It's a huge chunk. I wanted to keep going, but I would encourage you guys to keep reading through the rest of the story. You can kind of see a little bit about where Paul goes from there and what kind of some of his experiences are in that section of the book of Acts. But like I said, the idea was use this as kind of an opportunity to learn a new tool that you might add to the tool belt of Bible study, Bible meditation, something that you might be able to apply in other areas in the future. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jacob, and we'll get ready for our communion portion of our service. Or Joey, that's right, Joey. I'm going to turn it over to Joey, and we'll finish up.
Yeah. So it's asked to do the communion section this evening. So I've been kind of pondering upon it all week, and it wasn't really until today that I was like, this is what I'll say. I find it interesting, like, many times when we approach communion, we have this, I guess, kind of somber mentality, right? Or it's like we're very serious, we're very calm, very quiet, kind of reflecting upon what it is that we're doing. I think it's an appropriate response and attitude for us to have. Yet I think about this idea of sitting at a table with a bunch of people who are near and dearest to me, and I find that the emotion when I put myself in that position, the emotion I feel there is the complete opposite. I'm not feeling somber, I'm not feeling sad, I'm feeling joyful, and I'm feeling excited, maybe even a little bit too joyful, like we're kind of acting silly. So we recall what the elements represent, his body and his blood, a man who walks the same path that we walk and experience, the same emotions that we feel on a daily basis. But recalling that at the end of that, he experienced something that none of us in this room have experienced yet, which is death. And not just death in a light sense, right? It's not like he just got sniped in the head. He got murdered in a very painful and long way. So where does that joyfulness then come back into play? So I was reading in Matthew 26 where Jesus explains to them hey, when are you guys going to betray me? And verse 22 of 26 says, the disciples were saddened. It's kind of like Jesus killed a mood at the table, right? He was just no, we're hanging out and we're eating together like we normally do, but one of you guys is going to betray me. And I can just imagine kind of just going over to the room. It would be your friend dropping a ball and you in a conversation just being what? But not me, right? You see the scene play out and just all the time be but not me, right? But not me, And so where does the joyfulness come for us now that we have the foresight or the hindsight, I guess it would be, of knowing kind of how that ends? So every time we take part in the communion elements, we're reminded of these aspects of supper that the disciples had. One of the last times they would be dining with Jesus in this way. But the joy that was derived, I think, from just maybe sharing a meal with Jesus versus what Jesus was doing for them, that was even more important, I think, is where that source of joy can really come from. So now that whenever we take part in the elements, we're reminded of this beautiful sacrifice, right? That because of that, we get to take part in the elements with this attitude of not just somberness, right? We don't want to diminish those feelings. Those are important things to feel. We want to, we don't want to take for granted those things. But knowing that they represent a sacrifice that was for our good. And it was because of that we can experience communion now together with one another as fellow members of the kingdom, with hearts that know hey, someone's already taking care of us. We don't have to be looking around the table being who's going to betray us, right? Or who's betrayed Jesus? And we wrong the Lord all the time. But knowing that we can take delight in this future just kind of sense of oh, he died, right? He did die. He endured death. But more importantly, he came back to life. And because of that, we don't have to offer sacrifices, blood anymore. And I think that's something to me to be joyful about. So that's just something I kind of want us to kind of think in our mind as we're taking part of these elements tonight. That yes, these represent his body and his blood, and really this beautiful sacrifice that was given for us. But I would like us to kind of reflect on it in a more joyful sense of isn't it a beautiful thing that we can have these things, we can have these freedoms as fellow members of the kingdom. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it today. So yeah,
Thanks. So we will take a few moments here. We brought the solo cups back out again today. Whenever you can just take some time to contemplate that. I think that is really helpful, you know. The work really, it is finished, is what Jesus said. You know, it's done. There's a joy in being like, we don't have to have that uncertainty anymore that they felt. So there's something to be stoked about. So think about that, and then whenever you feel ready, you can go back to the table and partake of communion. We'll finish up after that.